So it's Dreamtime 3. Let's get right into it. If you're listening to this on the podcast, I've been requested a lot on Facebook and YouTube to keep doing these dream recollections because there seem to be nuggets of wisdom in them that are universal. Because you'd think nothing would be more boring than to listen to someone else's dreams, of course, and I would agree. Yet at the same time, if we're approaching this from kind of like a symbolic Jungian standpoint, a collective unconsciousness standpoint, then maybe there's some shared experience in there. Maybe my experience can help you glean something from your nocturnal adventures. Let's put it that way. And this next one, Dreamtime 3, this next one isn't recent, but this next one is important because of how it is different, and yet I again think somehow universal. It's something that could be experienced by many of you either in the past or hopefully in the near future. We're talking lucid dreaming here. Now, this was not something that was intentional, but this was something that was powerful that happened to me. Let's take the way, way back machine. We're in the middle of Mercury retrograde right now, 2020. Start of July, happy Canada Day, but let's go back to late spring 1991. University of Windsor, Ontario, Canada, where I am about to write my final exam, year 3, as a communications major with minors in English and film. And I am staying in, now, again, before we get into the dream, you have to know the setup because dreams are always a reflection of what you're going through mentally, psychologically, even just the physical events of the day get recounted via the dream. Sorry. So, at the time, I'm, of course, going through school, and I'd had the same girlfriend and best friend on and off for a year and a half. This was Joanne, who, in episode 2 of my podcast of Endings and Enlightenment, you can hear more about her story. Tragic, yet beautiful. And, and yeah, we had a challenging relationship, to say the least. And during this period, in the late spring, at the university, we were living in the same residence. This residence, infamous at my school, Huron Hall. It was renovated somewhat. It was completely falling apart and cockroach and rat ridden, but it was a renovated old motel about a 10-minute walk from the main campus near the entrance to the Ambassador Bridge going to Detroit, and right beside it was one of the busiest McDonald's restaurants in all of Canada. So many of us on the ground floor would slide open our sliding doors from our motel rooms and walk over to the all-night drive-thru and just grab cheeseburgers and fries and milkshakes or whatever, hangover food at 4 or 5 in the morning. But Joanne and I, my ex and I, my ongoing lifelong love and I, were having a period apart at the time. And she was seeing someone else, had been for months, and it drove me crazy. I wasn't a stalker by any stretch because, we lived on the same floor, we were going to see each other all the time. And we kept tabs on each other, and we still hung out quite a bit in a strange, kind of tense way because we'd established this routine with her roommate Jenny of late night talks about music and art and philosophy, and I learned how to make hummus and learned how to, smoke bottle tokes of hash, where you put a hole in the side of a 2-liter Coke bottle and, pop in a little piece of hash on the end of a cigarette, or you light it somehow on a pin and you breathe in the smoke, and we would all sit back and be baked until the wee hours and, grow up. Grow up a bit slowly, dream of the future while still being relatively young. So those things still happened, but for this period, right before exams, there was no sleeping for me, no getting baked and trying to stay awake. No, because I had that final exam. I'd finished all my other exams. I was going to ace this exam. Even if I failed it, I'd end up with a B. I think it was stats class or soc. And so what I did to distract myself from this obsession with my girlfriend and her boyfriend, who was, charming, nice, funny, kind of athletic dude, kind of simple, but, decent. Everyone liked him, and he was rumored to be well hung, and it drove me fucking mad. Any 20-something guy would be driven mad with jealousy, especially living 20 meters away down a hallway from your significant other, your ex-significant other. And I couldn't get her back. But what I could do was, nurture the friendship from afar, let her know that, I'm still around and, date a bit myself to keep a little bit of that 20-something jealousy going, because we're all possessive at that age, insanely so. But more importantly, I wanted information. And the information that I wanted was contained within a mythical diary. That's right. Just like Laura Palmer from Twin Peaks, Joanne was rumored to have a red-covered small notebook diary where she kept her deepest thoughts. And this was a girl who kept most of her thoughts in a vault. And it took that weed, and it took drinking, and it took many, many hours of talking to get the nitty-gritty, the juicy stuff, the real profound connections and ideas and thoughts and deep emotional feelings out of her. She was a cool one. And I was the exact opposite, far from cool. A little bit too fiery at times, as you all well know. And I was desperate to see this diary from its first glimpse when her roommate the year prior in the residence prior had shown it to me quickly and then hid it away and teased that Joanne kept all of her true thoughts about me in it. I had wanted to see it. I had rummaged through her room in Cartier Hall the year prior. I had gone to her house in Stratford in the summer and looked for it. I had asked and begged and pleaded. No luck. So, number one to this story is I'm obsessed with her diary to find out what she really thinks of me, to see if there's still a chance to get back together. And number two, to keep my mind off of her and to just deal with all the insanity that had happened that year and how I'd finished 5 exams and crammed for them and had this one kind of useless one after, and to kind of just flex a little strange 20-something manhood, I had a bet going with 4 other guys in the residence who could stay awake the longest before our final exams. And so we all had 1 exam left, and it was I think on the Friday at the end of the week. And did we start the competition on the Monday? I think so. Well, we'll understand the hours. We can parse that out by the end of it. Maybe it was Tuesday morning early. The whole point was we all agreed with the only wager being bragging rights, and then everyone chipping $5 into the pot, and the winner got it all and would go and just gorge themselves at said McDonald's next door late one night after some drinking and celebration, and their exam was completed. And the only rules were you couldn't use caffeine pills or not the Coke and Speed were around, but you couldn't use those types of artificials. You could have coffee, you could have Coca-Cola, you could have sugar, you could do exercise, you could hold your breath, you could use ice water, whatever was necessary to stay awake as long as you could. So it began. And I think I finished an exam on that Tuesday morning, celebrated with some drinks, but I knew that too much alcohol was going to make me drowsy, so I countered that out with lots of coffee and Coca-Cola and physical activity and running around and playing video games at someone's room that had a old Nintendo console at the time, and reading and having late night conversations and walking through the dangerous parts of town and being alert and staying up in the rec room in our residence and playing piano. I had an old stand-up piano there, and watching TV till the wee hours, and just kept doing this. And the 3 other guys, a weird motley crew if there ever was one, there was a computer geek guy, there was kind of a character at a Dazed and Confused who had a mullet, and everyone joked that he was a used car salesman, but he was always dude, and smoking a lot of pot. And then the other guy was this huge black linesman. He was a lineman, a football guy, and we all said, okay, let's get in on this. And I had a sense that my only really threatening competition was Vern, the big guy, and we kind of laughed at what the other guys were trying to do for their efforts, but the first day was fun, and we stayed up, we played cards together, we checked on each other, right? Because we're always spying on each other to see if someone's nodding off. If you close your eyes for more than a few seconds, if you don't respond immediately to being addressed, you were out. And I think on day 2, the dude had smoked too much pot. He was out. And that gave us a bit of a boost. And day 3, we caught the computer nerd JP. He had fallen asleep in front of his computer playing Tetris. He had kept his door open, or maybe he had locked his door, but I think Vern was able to use some sort of pass key or maybe slide the credit card in, and we broke into his room and saw that he was asleep, and we dumped some water on him, and he laughed. As long as we didn't hit his computer or ruin his Tetris score, that was okay. Now, it came around to about 88 hours, and Vern and I were sitting there and basically monosyllabic with each other and speaking in tongues and arm wrestling and rolling around the hallways and getting yelled at by the resident assistants and stuff. And finally he said, fuck it, dude. You win. You're the man. Take my $5. Get a couple of Big Macs on me. And it was, I think, around 90 hours at this point. And I was obsessed with getting 4 straight days. I was obsessed with getting 96 hours. So I wanted to hold up on this. And I think it was, I think the 90-hour mark was at around 8 o'clock at night. And I wanted to hold on, but I was getting loopy. Now, I was a fan, as you know, of Twin Peaks. And there's that great line from Kyle MacLachlan as Agent Dale Cooper where he says, as has been noted on American GIs during these sensitive psychological tests, sleep deprivation is a one-way ticket to temporary psychosis, and I'm working on a 3-day jag. Well, I was working on a 4-day jag, and I was hearing strange things, and I was seeing shadows moving that seemed three-dimensional, corporeal. I was hearing my internal monologue as monologue. I felt like I was hearing people's thoughts out loud, and people were frightened of me. Everyone was just staying away from me and saying, Brooke, you need to go to sleep right now. But I wouldn't. I just sat there and pounded sugar into coffee and drank it back. I'm like, I can do this. But I felt my eyes close at around the 92 or 93 hour mark. I was sitting on the edge of my bed in my room, my roommate dead asleep. It was dark, moonlight and street lights filtering in through the big sliding glass windows, and I was looking at that McDonald's. For some reason, it was like this bastion of safety. It was this oasis in my mind. And I was suddenly overcome with this intense feeling of fear, as every McDonald's should give you. I don't know, I was seeing horrific visions behind my closed eyes. I was not asleep, at least I didn't think so. I was still totally aware of my body, sitting on the edge of the bed, aware of my roommate Harold snoring, aware of the rank smell of the carpet and the cockroaches in the corner and the punk kids skateboarding by outside my door. And the traffic going on the Ambassador Bridge and the glaring red and yellow of the McDonald's, and then it would give me visions of Ronald McDonald's murderous face behind my eyes, and skulls and demons, and all these things were flashing. If you've ever had one of those sleep-deprived visions, or even, I guess all I can compare it to is a mild acid trip, anything I thought at that time was magnified to its most intense degree. So when I started having dark thoughts, they were like intensely dark. And I was overcome with this just utterly gripping, paralyzing, nauseating, drowning sensation of fear. And all I could think to do was run down the hall and knock on my ex's door. I didn't know if her boyfriend was going to be there. I didn't know what her roommate would think, even though we were all still technically friends. But usually they left their door unlocked, and this time they had as well. And I ran down the hallway and I knocked on the door and I heard them go, "What? Who is it?" And I'm like, "Please, I'm so sorry. It's Brooke. I'm scared." And I heard them whisper for a second, and Joanne's roommate Jenny was like, "Okay, fine, just come in and shut up. I need some sleep." It was after midnight at this point, 93 hour, 94 hour mark, in the sleeplessness. So I go into the room, and the room's set up with, you walk in the door, and there's one bed, horizontal, parallel to the wall, to the sliding glass door wall. And then the other bed was in an L. So Jenny's head was at Joanne's head, and their feet were spread off like L. And then a little desk and a sitting area. And the room was dark, but they always had a couple of weird colored lamps on with like shades over them, fabrics and stuff, creating cool colors. But it definitely felt like I was stepping into an antechamber, like the kind of like a Black Lodge waiting room for hell. I was more disturbed stepping into the room, but I still felt strangely safe because these were my friends. But as I looked at them, their faces were like shifting and morphing again, this kind of psychedelic effect of lack of sleep. It's all I could reason with it. And Jenny looks at me and goes, "You look fucked up. Just shut up and get in bed beside her. Don't touch her. You guys don't fight. Don't do anything. But it's clear that you're messed up and you need to stay here." And I'm like, "Joanne, are you sure?" And she just looks at me and rolls her eyes and goes, "Fine, get in bed." So I get in bed beside my best friend / ex / wish I could have her back. And I wasn't thinking anything romantic or sexual. I'm just lying down and I'm against the wall. I'm pinned against the wall. Covers over me, covers over her. Behind us, there's Jenny sleeping, perpendicular to us. And almost immediately, I had this feeling like I was being suffocated, like I couldn't breathe, like my body was wrapped in, like I was stuck in an iron lung, like something was squeezing the breath out of me, and I could barely breathe in. And the worse it got, the more paralyzed I felt. Later would find out this is a common sleep paralysis thing with like lucid dreams, but it was paralyzed. I could barely breathe. And then the lighting in the room changed. It got darker overall, like everything dimmed except a brightness off in my periphery. And I swear I'm awake, and I'm saying, Joanne, help me. And she's just, shut up, I'm trying to sleep. And I'm like, please help me. And I'm terrified. I think I'm going to die. And then it gets worse, because that fear and that terror in my mind reached such a degree of helplessness and abject fear that it somehow, you'll laugh at this, but in my mind, this is what happened at the time, it somehow summoned something. It opened a portal, and that darkness in the room with the light to my periphery, the light grew into this like ray that was like the opening of a door, like someone had opened the door, but it wasn't a person. It was something was stepping through from somewhere else, and this impossibly tall, impossibly slender, alien-esque giant from Twin Peaks, faceless, gray, white, black, shifting, thin shadow creature. It's all I can call it. This thing takes these impossibly long strides into the room, and somehow out of my periphery, even though I couldn't turn my head because I was paralyzed, I saw it. It was inhuman. It was surreal. It was a demon, and I couldn't stop it. And it walks into the room and turns, and its head is scraping the ceiling, and the ceiling disappears and turns to stars and darkness. And then it moves towards me, and it takes small steps towards me as it grows and grows and grows. And I'm, Joanne, please help me. Help me. And the room went silent except for this like rushing of water deep underground, this rolling thunder as this thing stepped towards me, and its face that was blank, all of a sudden these eye holes opened up in its face and its mouth, and light streamed out of this black-gray being's face, and I was blinded by light as its hand reached down towards me, closer and closer and closer and closer. And then I felt something, this pressure on my face, this thing muffling my breathing. And I thought I was going to die. And I tried to scream, and I couldn't. And as its hand covered my vision, and I was blinded by white light, in that whiteness and in that sound, that thundering flow of subterranean water, all of a sudden in that whiteness, the whiteness was peeled back like a blanket or a duvet or a cover or a tarp of some sort. And underneath it, on what looked like sponge or foam or maybe like ocean foam, underneath it was a shape. And that shape was a small rectangle. And that rectangle was red in color, with a little bit of gold fringing along its spine on one side. That's right. It was a book. More precisely, it was a diary. And as it opened, I was struck by the energy, the realization, what I felt was the information within, and I yelped, I shouted, and bolted upright in the bed. Ah! and screamed and held the wall. And, Joanne and Jenny wake up and look at me like, what the are you doing? And as calmly yet obviously super jacked and caffeinated and frantic as I could, I told them exactly what happened. Exactly. I told them 3 times, looking at each of them, talking to myself, just so it didn't sound as insane as it really was. And Jenny looks at me, normally rolling her eyes at my flakitude, looks at me with her jaw slowly dropping, and turns to her best friend, to my ex and friend, to her roommate, and says, "You gotta show him." And I'm like, "What? Show me what?" And Joanne kind of screws up her face, but in her eyes I could tell that she was really shaken and a little bit disturbed, scared by this. She tells me to get off the bed, and she gets up, and she lifts up the mattress and lifts up a little foam liner under the mattress, and directly beneath where I was lying down was the diary, the legendary diary. I didn't get to read it because I didn't need to anymore. I think about 3 weeks later, we were back together. Maybe she thought the universe had scared her into it. I don't know. But how about you? Have you had any lucid dreams? Have you ever had any messages from beyond the veil, from the other side? Maybe this will give you some insight as to why I've written a book series about the power of dreams and how they can maybe bleed into this world. Yeah, would love your thoughts. More soon. Take care of yourselves and each other. And stay safe, stay healthy. And to my North American friends, happy independence, whatever that looks like to you in this crazy world we're living in right now. Be well. Peace.